Good morning, everyone. How are you? I'm not sure if it's a cold morning or a warm morning on your side, but it's definitely cold on my side. Hope you are keeping warm. So I am so excited today as we present another webinar for our student chapter, Things I Wish I Knew Before I Graduated. Wow. I mean, I wish I knew all of this. I wish I had all of this when I was actually starting out in my career. But hey, it is what it is. You are fortunate to have this opportunity. So good morning, everyone. And before we start, let's set out the house rules. And I can just ask everyone to keep their mics and their videos off at all times. If you have a question, a contribution, or anything pertaining to what we are discussing today, please just make sure you put it in the chat box, and we'll try to make sure that we get through everything before the end of this session, which we'll try to make sweet and short. So before we continue, we'll just show you our agenda on what will be going on today. Mike, please just share the agenda there so that we can show all our participants and our attendees what we're going to be doing today. So basically, my name is Rose Mlingwa. I will be your host and your coordinator today. I am a supply chain officer and a brand ambassador for Awiska, and I will be with you and coordinating this event today. And so today we will be just basically, we are having chilled time where we are just addressing issues around things I wish I knew before graduating. So basically, as I am welcoming everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to join this discussion and taking this a moment to just be with us. I'm sure you will definitely get a lot of pearls of wisdom. So we will also then have Ms. Zolo, who will introduce to us Awiska, what Awiska is about, and the purpose of this webinar. And then we will have our speaker, Tinashe. I will tell you more about him just before he speaks. And then please, guys, whatever questions you have, nothing is off limits pertaining to this specific topic. So put your questions, Tinashe will be there to answer, and we will try and get you equipped for whatever it is that is bringing fear and doubts in your head. And then we have the vote of thanks, and then we close, and that's it. But we know it never ends there. We'll obviously be continuing these discussions as we go along. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Ms. Zolo, who is the founder of Awiska. Thank you so much, Ms. Zolo, for joining us this morning. If you can just take the floor and just tell everyone, what is Awiska? Why are we here today? Where did this all start from? I mean, hey, everyone could be somewhere else, but we're here because of the vision that you had. So we would like to hear more about that before we continue with the program. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Good morning, everyone. Where are you from? Which university are you coming from? Welcome to our session. My name is Zolo. I am the founder of Awiska. You can see I've got a beautiful background here, flowers, and outside. And I decided that today's session is the one that is lively, with energetic people coming from different universities. Tian, welcome. I'm very excited to be part of the session and honestly being invited to come and talk to yourself. Today, we are talking about just about anything and everything that you want to know. All of us have been in university, and we find ourselves trying to adjust in the industry. So we are having this beautiful conversation around that with Tinashe, who has just joined us this morning. And thanks to the team, Awiska team, we call them the A team, for really running with the session and ensuring that we are empowering just about everyone out there. So tell me, probably most of you are still wondering what Awiska is about and why we are all part of this webinar. Guys, you have to be part of Awiska student chapter. Let me tell you what we want to achieve. So we founded Awiska in 2016 with an idea of cross mentorship and coaching in the industry on supply chain management. And when I'm saying supply chain management, from procurement all the way to the logistics. Why are we doing that? We want to build capacity. We want to make sure that yourself as a youth out there have got options. So we created a Awiska Youth chapter with the aim of empowering you to understand what happens in the workspace and what happens in entrepreneurship perspective. So we are doing that so if you can't find a job, you'll be able to opt for other opportunities in the industry. But if you are intending to be in the workspace, we give you exposure as a student in the industry by doing what? Taking you for site visits, guest lecturing, coaching, being part of the coaching circles and webinars like this, which is very important for us as well. I know some of you, we have met you as part of our journey of empowerment in the universities. Because of COVID, we haven't necessarily done much of it, but part of what we have been doing is that being able to link some of the students with the organizations that are looking for students for internships and learnerships as well. It's one of the things that we are trying to really ensure that the industry as a whole, and whoever is in the industry is listening to us, we are really challenging them that we have a youth, we have all of you that has got abundance of knowledge and wealth that we are increasing as well from our side, so they can support you in ensuring that you grow and you get opportunities in the industry. So today it's really around what to expect when you get into the industry. Let me tell you, I remember when I started studying and on my second year, I started working in the supply chain environment. No one was mentoring me. I needed someone to coach me, to tell me what to expect when I get into the industry. That was the biggest job, really maneuvering around, finding myself, not understanding the language in the industry. So the idea today is to ensure that we empower you with the skills. And this is part of the journey. I want you to understand that we want to empower you with the skills that when you decide to go out there in the industry, what to know, what questions you will be asked so that you are not stuck. But always remember that besides the webinar that you are having today, you have an AWISCA team, you have ourselves to coach you and to mentor you so that you are not lost in the industry. So today it's all about you. It's all about empowering you. It's all about ensuring that you are given the capacity, the skills to know what to expect, because the knowledge that is coming from Tinashe is exactly the journey that he has walked, is the journey, is the challenges that he would have seen whilst entering in the workspace. So please enjoy the session, enjoy the webinar today. Make sure that if you do have some questions, Rose, Mike, Tinashe, be able to give the guidance to the youth out there. You are the future of tomorrow. I would want to see you out there, being part of our team, being part of our youth chapter. I want to see you being part of the industry out there with our mentorship and our coaching. So take advantage of this opportunity, because we are there to support you, to capacitate you as well, so that you become successful in the industry. Again, everyone, my name is Mr Zolo. Everyone calls me the supply chain coach. Don't read as to what is being put on the agenda, that CE founder. I am a supply chain coach. I love talking to you and looking forward to seeing you in your universities. Invite us. We've been doing a lot of guest lecturing out there. So looking forward to meeting up with yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Letsolo. Before you go, I think this morning we really want to appreciate the road that you've walked for us to have this platform this morning, because obviously you've gone through all the hardships. As you said, when you started, you didn't have anyone to mentor you, and we then started, and then you saw the vision for the AWISCA student chapter, and we're here today. And I mean, I can speak for myself, I can speak for Kat, I can speak for Michael, that we are here because we saw the passion that you had, and we are trusting that we want this to filter down to this next generation so that they can also grasp it and run with it, because it's all our platform and we all carry the torch. It's not up to one person. So thank you so much, and we appreciate your time. And today you are on the other side, so we thank you. And we will be continuing, but and I'm sure we will have more programs with you for the students chapter specifically. So guys, always watch out for that, because we've got a lot coming. We will share obviously the supply chain coach details on the chat for you to join on Instagram. We do a lot of coaching, mentorship, and training on there as well, so that you can be part of all of that and not miss out on anything. Ms. Letsolo, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you for the invite. Hope you guys enjoy the session.
Wonderful. So as we continue, guys, there you have it. You understand the vision, you understand why we're here this morning, and we're hoping this will be a fruitful time where we are going to allow you to ask all the questions and actually get everything that you feel you do not understand at this point. So as we continue this morning, I would like to introduce Tinashe, who is the main guest speaker for our event today. And as I said, the topic is things I wish I knew before graduating. Wow. I mean, that sounds so huge. And then you're like, don't I know everything? I mean, I'm in university. When we graduate, we feel like the world is our oyster. We know everything. But hey, I think there's a lot of things that when you get on the other side, you're like, oh my word. So anyway, Tinashe will give us all those details. But to introduce Tinashe, so he has a decade's experience within the freight forwarding industry and has worked in various roles in operations management and in the commercial space. So he holds a BCom honors degree in logistics from UJ. Anyone from UJ here today, please give Tinashe a shout out. He's part of the alumni. And he also holds a higher certificate in sales from the Da Vinci Institute of Technology, and most recently completed his MBA, his Master's in Business degree from the Gordon Institute of Business Science. He is currently a senior regional sales manager at DSV Global Transport Logistics. Wow, that is a mouthful. I mean, I could say so much, but I don't want to take the spotlight from him. Tinashe, please show your face. Where are you this morning? Good morning. Please unmute your mic. And thank you so much, Tinashe. I mean, hey, sales for Gauteng. You're a busy man, but you took the time to be with us this morning. We are so grateful. And I know a number of people watching are also very grateful for what you want to bring to the program. You've walked a mile. You've walked miles, actually, let me say, where most of us as graduates, as people that are still studying, we also want to walk those miles, you know, but there's a journey, there's experiences, there's do's and don'ts, there's shocks, there's expectations that actually don't happen. So today we're hoping this will be a platform where, I mean, the conversation can go on, but we're hoping that somehow we can at least shed a bit of light to a starting conversation of the journey that you've walked, the shoes that you've filled, and, you know, something that can enlighten the graduates up there. So I just want to give you this opportunity to just share your story, share your journey. And once again, I really want to thank you for taking this time to be with us.
No, thank you for that rather interesting introduction. Well, look, I don't think I've walked a mile, but I'm still on the journey. And it still continues.
Stay humble. Of course, we always want to stay humble, but those watching on the other side can attest.
No, of course.
You are here today, so thank you so much, Tinashe.
No, 100%. Well, firstly, I want to obviously thank Awiska for the opportunity, and thank them for the platform to just come on board and share the little that I know that I've gathered over the time that I've been in the industry, and also just my journey from the time from being a student and also coming into the workspace and working through the different levels within the corporate space, and finally now getting into my current role as a Gauteng sales manager at DSV. So obviously at a point in time, I was also a student. I went to UJ, as Rose has alluded to. Any UJ people in the house? I haven't seen anyone from UJ here. Let's see. I see a lot of UP, yeah? A lot of UP stand up there. I did my master's with the Gordon Institute. Oh, yes, NOMT, UJ representing. Come on, UJ. So I did my master's at the Gordon Institute of Business Science as late as 2018, 2019, which is associated with the University of Pretoria. And so that was the last thing that I studied. But for now, it took everything out of me that for now, I'm done with books for now. So still thinking of the PhD, but I will see about that, because I still do want to get back into academia, as I'm very passionate about the youth. I'm very passionate about, you know, people coming up, and because we are part of the future. In fact, we are the future, if I can put it like that, as I still do count myself as part of the youth. once again, thank you, Awiska, for the platform. And I feel envious, thinking about it. I wish at a point in time, I sat on the other side of the screen as well, and I was a student and listened to someone else telling me what they wish they knew before graduating. Because most of the time you get a shock when you get into corporate, and then you really now understand the fundamentals, and you now get to understand how does it work? How does this beast work? How do I navigate my way through corporate, and how do I make sure that I achieve my goals in that particular space? Now, the reason for me sharing today is not because I know it all. No, not at all. I subscribe to what Chimamanda Adichie writes when she talks about the power of storytelling. She talks about the dangers of a single story. And essentially, she's saying that the world is full of stories. We are rich up because of our diversity. We're rich up because of our different stories. We're rich up because we come from different places, and because of our different experiences. When we share with each other, that is when we become powerful. That is when we become able to actually tap into our full potential. You learn from me, I learn from you. So I'm not sharing today because I think I've conquered it all. No, not at all. I'm still on a journey myself. I'm still trying to get to a certain point within my own career, but I feel that I've experienced enough at this point in time to also share to those who come, who are coming after me. Because at a point in time, I also had to ask someone who had traveled the journey ahead of me along certain things. So I wish in sharing my story today, I'm able to inspire a few people. I'm able to, light a fire in some of you, even if it's one person or whatever the number is. But the aim for me really is to just share a bit of my own personal experiences, not to say that, those are the end and be all of it, but they are part of the story. Hence, I refer to the dangers of a single story. Now, that being said, I think majority of the audience is still in university, and I know, university can be a bit daunting at times. Some of you are probably facing your final examinations, and some of you are in their final years of university. And so, you're in this phase where you're asking yourself, where to from here? So at a point in time as well, I sat in the same boat. I was fortunate enough that in my final year of university, I got my first offer with regards to the job industry. So obviously, the South Africa that we sit in today, in the South Africa of 10 years back, 12 years back, is a bit different. Because again, when we look at the unemployment statistics from where we sit today, very much different from that South Africa that we sat in back in the day. And so I do understand that there could be a lot of anxiety in the room with regards to how do I then get myself out there? How do I single out myself with regards to getting myself into the job market? Now, that being said, I will tell my story in the different phases that I've traveled. So let me start off by the time when I was still a student into the time when I joined then the work world, and we take it up to my current stage. So part of my story will definitely be much more relatable to the students. Then part of it, I'll need you to use your imagination because you haven't lived those realities. Because if some of you haven't worked, then some of it might be a bit difficult to connect to. But it's tools that I want to give to you to say, when you eventually get a job and you're now navigating your way in the corporate world, these are some of the things that have worked for me in just advancing my own career and making sure that I land where I am at the moment. So firstly, I believe that it's very important that one's identity. So all of us come from somewhere. I was born in a high density suburb. Grew up in the dusty streets, playing soccer there. And this world that I live in today was really a far-fetched idea, if I can put it like that. But the reason why I mention my background is to say, where you come from, while it has a bearing on where you eventually land up or on your experiences in life, does not necessarily determine your destiny. So it doesn't matter where you come from. I think that's the first thing that I've learned in my journey. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. It doesn't matter what your background was. But I sincerely believe, and I believe that I've lived that reality myself, that you are indeed the captain of your own destiny. Don't be tied up by, where you come from, because that is part of your past. But you navigate your way and you write your own story as you move forward. As I said earlier again, it's very much difficult when you're sitting now as a student and you're trying to visualize the future. Steve Jobs talks about connecting the dots, because at a point in time, Steve Jobs was the founder of Apple. And at a point in time, he was asked about his success, and he spoke about joining the dots. What he essentially meant at that time was the fact that it's very difficult to join the dots looking forward. So at a point in time, I said as a student, I didn't know where I was going to work. It all didn't make sense, but I needed to trust that something was going to give. I needed to trust that something was going to work out in my favor. And so Steve Jobs says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. So you have to trust the dots, that the dots will somehow connect in the future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. I don't want to prescribe to you what to trust in. I'm a Christian. So for me, that centers me. For me, that makes me calm in certain situations. And that's what I trusted in with regards to my own journey as I left university, going into the workspace. And at the most unexpected of times, I happened to get an opportunity at a company called Kuehne+Nagel, and that is where I started my journey at the time. So now that I got unemployed at the time, when I look back, I then think to myself, one of the very most important things that as a student or as a potential job seeker you need to be doing is your research with regards to the different companies that you want to be working for. So, get to understand who they are. And this research is really available on the internet. I think we're now living in the fourth industrial revolution, and we've got this information at our fingertips, So just researching those companies as part of your preparation for your applications, making sure that your CV is up to date, and just making sure that your social media footprint, is also a good one. Because companies are increasingly now paying attention to our social media footprints, paying attention to what we post, the views that we post, what we subscribe to, what we talk about, that sort of thing. Because it's also about public image at the end of the day, in current day. So while this obviously technology has enabled us to get more access to information, it's also exposed us quite a lot in terms of our own identities into the world. But that is another topic for a different day. All that I'm saying is that, you want to do a lot of research into the companies that you want to eventually work for, ultimately, at the end of the day. Just one step back, actually, I wish before I became a student, I had been taught around career guidance, because I sort of fell into logistics at the time when I went into university, but thank God that it worked out. Now, in just with regards to doing your proper research, get to understand because by the time that you get into your third year, into your honors, you really understand the subjects that you've dealt with. And you sort of understand the industry that you're going to work in. Make use of the resources that are in front of you. Make use of the laboratories that you have in universities. Make use of your cell phones to get onto Google, understand which companies can I potentially work for, and get to understand a bit more about those companies prior to you going to your first interviews. Because it's very important that when you walk into your first interviews, you have an understanding of the general industry, the general market conditions that that company finds itself in, and why you'd want to work for that particular company. Now, as I said again, it's a tough job market. So you obviously want to make sure that you differentiated yourself. So what am I talking about when I refer to differentiating yourself? Talking about the makeup of your CV. What is in your CV? What have you put in there? Of course, at that point in time, you don't have a lot of experience, but the structure that you put in there also makes a difference for the recruiters who are looking to tap into the talent, into the universities, and also get you on board into the different companies. Make sure you attend, obviously, the career fairs, and make sure that you're able to ask relevant questions that link very much to the companies that you want to get involved with ultimately. So that is really prior to you getting into the space of the work environment. I mean, we join in different ways. There's so many different ways for you to actually be applying to the companies, the different websites, and also just your network as well. Utilize your network wherever you know who's got maybe contacts in the workspace, and also see, you know, if you are close to anyone really who's got of influence, whom you can try and talk to try and get you a learnership or a graduate opportunity in the companies. There's many graduate opportunities that are being that are currently in the market with regards to what you can actually find in the workspace. So I think that pretty much covers for me the prior, you know, journey when I first started in the industry. So for me, I happen to be again fortunate, you know, to have gotten an opportunity quite early in my journey. So I got my first contract when I was doing my honors, and so I was given a permanent contract at the time and started off in at Kunanagal in the road freight department. Now, much of the lessons that I want to share then relate more to when now you are now in the workspace, you know, what to look out for, what to sort of really strengthen as you move forward. Now, I joined Kunanagal and I started off really, you know, you walk in there and you've got your degree and you think you've learned it all. You think you've really done it all, you understand what it's about. But interestingly enough, when I did my master's, that is now almost 9 years later after joining the workspace, my thesis was around the skills gap between what academia teaches and what is actually in industry. And so my findings did confirm that there is indeed a skills gap. So the question is, how do we close that skills gap, right? And it is a collaboration between academia and also the industry. And so that we come together and we do a collaborative effort in that sense. Now, having joined Kunanagal at the time, one of the first lessons that I learned was, you know, don't be afraid to start at the bottom. I think that's very important. So I've done it all. I've, you know, in supply chain and logistics, or rather in the freight forwarding space in particular, we work a lot with warehousing, we work a lot with containers, we work a lot with trucks, because our spread of activities, you know, cover your ocean freight, your air freight, your road freight. And so when I started out, you know, I had to experience I knew the stuff from a theoretical point of view, but I'd never really experienced the stuff from a practical point of view. And so when I started, I didn't think that I'd find myself at the back of a container trying to, you know, working with guys who are doing the packing and trying to see how things would fit into a particular container. I didn't envision that at the time, you know, but when I joined, I did find myself, you know, having to go through all those particular steps and understand how each and every component fit, right? Getting into the back of a container and understanding, okay, this is a 40-foot, this is a 20-foot. Getting into the back of a truck one of the days, getting into the warehouse and actually also, you know, donning my safety boots and understanding how warehouse operations worked. But at the time, it seemed like a dirty job, right? You know, seemed like, oh, geez, I've come out of varsity, I've got my degree. Why do I have to start at this point in time? But you have to be willing to start at the bottom and do some uncomfortable things. Because now when I look back, I can talk of those things with authority because I have been there, I have done it, I understand how it works. But at the time, it was daunting. Again, this is the benefit of hindsight, right? So at the time, it was daunting, and this is something that obviously is different in different industries, depending where you work. Starting at the bottom looks different in different industries, but that is where I started, and so that is where my experience as well started. Because now I knew the stuff from a practical point of view, and I knew the stuff, how it actually worked. I knew the constraints, and so now years later, I can talk about it as a distant memory, but I can talk about it with confidence to say, I understand how containers are packed. I understand the constraints or the challenges that our service providers go through when they do the work for us. And so I can sit in a room and have a conversation, and again, you know, really add to the richness of that particular conversation. So do not be afraid to start at the bottom at all. Secondly, the second thing that I learned during the time was the importance of showing up. When you get an opportunity and you join, these organizations coming through from university, you've got a chance to almost rebrand yourself because you've gotten into a different space altogether where you're introducing yourself afresh. They don't know you in those particular circumstances. In university, they knew you as someone, as a wherever you are, they knew your name and you're an A student and you got your high grades and all of that. Then you get into the corporate space where you're now again a very much a junior person in that space. But the important thing is to show up. What do I mean by showing up? Showing up means that you are going to give the best of you each and every day that you go to that particular organization that you've joined. They are going to come there and really push and really learn and really come there with an open mind. They also talk about, they say that the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write. It is those who cannot unlearn and then relearn. So allow yourself to get into those spaces and learn certain things and then relearn them, because in certain instances, what you have learned from a theoretical point of view is very different from what you learn in a practical sense. So show up and do it for yourself. It is very important to know your why. And for me, I think that is it's a very critical element as you go forward into the corporate space, knowing your why, knowing why you are there. The reason why knowing your why is important for me is that it will help you navigate through very difficult times, sometimes if they do come in the workspace, so that you always focus on why you are there and you're not distracted or you're not you're not discouraged when difficult times come. So knowing your why, knowing your purpose, why you're there, knowing exactly what it is that you've come to achieve. So for me, it took quite a while to understand what my purpose was. And it's something that I still grapple with now, to say, have I truly found my purpose? So I do think that my purpose within the corporate space, I think I've been called to lead. And so I thank God that at this point in time, I find myself in those positions of influence where I'm able to lead and influence and also share the bit that I know with my teams as we move forward in our journey as a company. The other lesson that I learned early on, I think, when I look back again, the benefit of hindsight, be curious. When you get into these spaces, there's a lot of things that you want to know. And so be curious, ask the relevant questions, understand how things work. Because everything within the workspace, everything is linked. It is a system, it is a web. One thing affects the other. So if there's one thing that I wish I knew earlier as well, was just around the system's way of thinking, understanding that each component of a business actually affects the other component. Nothing works in isolation. So sometimes when you then talk to your MD or being the managing director, there's certain decisions that they might take that you might not necessarily understand. But when you understand the system's way of thinking and understand how things affect one another, the human resource side affects the operational element. The operational element affects the financial component. The financial component affects what we're doing in the market, that sort of thing. And the fact that companies don't exist in isolation, they exist in a certain ecosystem, which is, the economy that we find ourselves in. So it's very important that you try and be curious, you ask the questions, you try and understand the mechanics of why that particular company is successful, what makes it successful, what can be done better. Be in a position where you can actually contribute to the conversations around innovation. What can we do better? Because you're obviously bringing in your young mind in there, and you've got other ideas that you want to actually bring in. In certain instances, you'll find that a company has been doing the same thing for a very long time because that is what they understand to have worked over a long period of time. But when you come in and you've got an opportunity to bring fresh ideas, you've got an opportunity to question how things have been done for the past 20 years, use that opportunity. And of course, I know this is a function of also the environment allowing you to express yourself. It is obviously not a one-sided sort of a conversation. The organizations as well that you ideally want to be working for should have, of course, the right culture, which is something that's maybe at that point in time a bit beyond your control, right? But whatever that is within your control, be curious, remain young, remain foolish, as Steve Jobs would say. And so he mentions remain young, remain foolish, talking around not foolish in the actual sense, but just keeping up that curiosity and not being stagnant and just accepting how things are done, but questioning it in a very constructive manner that allows you to also add to the value of that particular conversation. Because in doing so, you are sculpting yourself, you are creating an identity for yourself within that particular environment. So I'm talking about the, sculpting your own identity. The other thing that I learned was the importance of reputation. So in corporate, one of the things that I've learned is your greatest sort of, for me in any case, my advancement as a person has largely been a result of people who have spoken for me, with me not being present in the room. So when you build a reputation that precedes you, your work ethic, the way that you show up, your curiosity, your ability to contribute to conversation within that environment helps build your reputation. And you want to be in a position where people can speak of you with you not being in the room, and they talk about you based on your work ethic, based on what you bring to the table, based on saying this person is the one that I want on my team. And so in doing so, that opens up paths, and it opens up doors, and it opens up other avenues for you to explore as you move forward. So very important to always obviously be very conscious of what reputation do I want to build, what brand image do I want to be known for, what work ethic do I want to be known for. Do I want my work to be judged and be said that it's of a poor quality, or do I want it to be judged to be said, if I get work from this person, it's of a high quality? And that's the space that you want to be sitting in, one that says your reputation is a great one, and when you're not there, when people talk of you, it's always in a positive fashion. And it's not about, oh no, they come to work late and they submit their stuff late. No, that stuff, it builds the wrong reputation. It breeds the wrong perception around you as a person. So linked to that as well is just the aspect of discipline. The workspace is largely driven by discipline. So you find different workspaces. You'll find that there's workspaces where you are micromanaged, and then you'll find there's places where you've got you've got the space to navigate yourself, pretty much, with no one necessarily being on your case around, has this been done, has that been done? But the aspect of discipline is not necessarily limited to work. It applies in every other aspect of our lives. Just being disciplined and doing what you must when you must. So of course, most of you, are coming from university, and of course, the degrees will come and you will graduate. Some of you will graduate cum laude. Some of you will graduate top of the class, and that sort of thing. When you will get into the workspace, be humble, but confident. Humble does not mean that you're not confident. You can be humble and be confident at the same time. Those two things can move in tandem. So you can be humble and graceful at the same time. You can be humble and confident, as I said, because there's so many people within that workspace who would have done quite a bit, prior to you arriving in that space. And so they know quite a lot more than you know at that point in time. But does that mean that you have to also spend the same amount of years learning what they learned? Not necessarily, because our ability to understand different concepts, our ability to break down different concepts differs from person to person. So it might take you a bit less to understand those things, but be humble, but be confident in your capabilities. Be confident in what a UP has put into you. Be confident in what a UJ has put into you, into what the VAL has put into you. All these institutions that are currently working, that you're currently contracted to at the moment, have put something in you. So be confident of your own ability as well. And so that confidence will help you to speak up when opportunity arises. I know sometimes when you get into the workspace, you can you can be overwhelmed because you're coming up into this space where all the people have the experience, all the people seem to know what they're doing, and for you and for yourself, you don't fully understand the space. But be kind to yourself. It takes time. It takes time to gain experience. It takes time to build a profile and get to a point where you're really comfortable with what you're doing. I'm 12 years into the industry and I'm still learning some of the things up to this day. Only this morning, actually, I was trying to figure out something which supposedly I should know by now, but there's always something new that comes up in our industry or in the workspace because the world is moving fast as well. So don't be afraid not to know. It's okay to get into the workspace and not know. And as you journey along, there will always be something that you don't know. If you get to a point where now you know everything, maybe it's time then for the next challenge, either hopefully within that organization, or if there's other better and really challenging opportunities that come up, maybe it's time to move on. As you go through this journey as well, there's many mistakes that you'll make. I've also made mistakes as I've journeyed through my own travels within the workspace. Some of them significant, some of them not significant. And the same way that you have failed in your current studies, the same way that you have maybe failed a module or that sort of thing, is the same way that it works in corporate. There'll be things that you won't be able to deliver on time, and there'll be clients that will be unhappy with you, or your managers will be unhappy with you. But do not be afraid to make those mistakes, because that is how we learn. And in doing so, what matters is the attitude then that you bring that you bring to the table. You need to own up and ask for help where needed. Asking for help does not mean that you're weak. Asking for help won't expose you to say, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. But it says, I am here, I'm human, I'm willing to learn if you will teach me. And as I said, this is the workspace that you're in, hopefully, is a conducive enough environment that will allow for that exchange of ideas, that will allow for that exchange of lessons. And so for me, having experienced it in the past, hence I landed on, I think my purpose is I want to lead, because I want to create those spaces where people are able to make mistakes, but learn from them, and also bring the right attitude in terms of how we move on. I spoke to you guys earlier around where I started. I started out, obviously, as I said, right at the bottom, playing a different role in those particular teams that I was in, the packing of containers, the packing of stuff in the warehouse. Was it enjoyable? Maybe not, because it was hard work at the time. But the importance of it that I've learned as I've moved into different roles is the importance of being able to play different roles in the team. Sometimes you'll be the leader, sometimes you'll be the follower. And so being versatile enough to be able to put on different hats at different times in your career is very important. At a point in time, I was a follower, someone was leading me. And at this juncture in my career, I'm now the leader in my particular space. Of course, I've got other people who are on top of me who are leading, but I've been able to put on different hats in my career. If I think of the pivotal moments that have come my way, I spent a year in Mozambique working in the oil and gas space. And at the time, again, I needed to wear a different hat, having gone to a foreign country where they spoke predominantly Portuguese. But some of my greatest lessons came from that uncomfortable space that I found myself in. So point is, be willing to play different roles as you go along. Be willing to be the intern when you start out. Be willing to be the person who doesn't know in the team, who's asking all the relevant questions. Be willing to be at a point in time to be the devil's advocate, to question processes. Be willing at a point in time when you've gained some experience to be the innovator. At a point in time, as you go along, be willing to be in that space where you then now take the baton and you're actually playing a leadership role. But all of this comes with time, and it comes with you playing different roles, adding to your experience, and also being patient enough to stay in that moment when you are in that moment, to fully experience it so that it enriches you fully as a person. There's so much that I can talk about with regards to my career, but last night when I went to sleep, I was just trying to pick out the nitty-gritties, the ones that I think are pearls, which are important to know. As you get into the workspace, or once you're in there, you need to know key moments. You need to know when to take your chances. Now, as time moves on, there will be certain opportunities that will come your way. Some of them may seem daunting, and some of them you might feel that you're not equipped to particularly do those jobs that you've been given. But take your chances. Learn to be able to read in between the lines to know, okay, this is a key opportunity that has come my way that can potentially change the trajectory of my career. Don't be fixated on what you have studied. Don't be fixated on what you know. Don't be fixated on what you're bringing in, but be open-minded enough to explore certain things that are outside your realm. So obviously I studied logistics, but I found myself involved in projects that have to do with finance. Nothing related to what I studied really. I found myself in projects to do with IT. Again, nothing that's really related to my studies. But because of my of what I think to be my purpose, which is to lead, I understand the importance then of me knowing a bit of everything in order for me to have a conversation when the time comes. Hence, I've been open to learning a bit about everything around the business, even though it's not necessarily linked to what I studied in university. So what am I saying? I'm saying when you get into that space, go in with an open mind. Don't only be fixated on supply chain, on logistics. There is so much more within this space, within the corporate space, that all adds up to your value as a human being, or as an employee, or as a part of a team in that particular space. I've spoken a lot again around amassing experience as you go along. And so as you go along, you will be sitting, you will understand the power of negotiation. When you start out your contracts, when I look back, when I started out, it's very difficult to negotiate when you start out because you're also coming in with not a lot of experience. But you obviously want to be, paid a fair wage at the time when you join whatever company that you join. And as you go along with experience, the importance of learning to negotiate your worth. I cannot I cannot emphasize that any much really beyond that. The ability to, hone the ability as the years go by to be able to negotiate your worth, to be able to negotiate your contracts, because that is what it is about, right? The corporate space, you want to be able to definitely, negotiate your worth as you move on within that space. Understanding how contracts work, understanding what it is that the company is putting on your table, and if it satisfies what it is exactly, that you also bring to the table, understanding your worth and being able to ask, what you believe is, would be a fair sort of wage for you. However, that being said, I've also learned that sometimes experience is more valuable than money. There is things that I've learned, which at that point in time, I felt that whatever was my salary was not necessarily reflective of what I was bringing to the table. But those times have actually been more crucial for me bringing me to this particular stage in my career. But what I was putting on the table and what the company was paying for me at the time, whichever company I was working for, might not have been what I wanted. But it was frustrating, you know. I could have thrown in the towel and said, you know, I don't want to be a part of this. But I'm glad that I stayed the course, because sometimes that experience is more valuable than the money. I spoke earlier with regards to Steve Jobs talking around joining the dots. Always difficult joining the dots looking forward, because in that moment when I was in those jobs and I felt a bit underpaid, it didn't make sense. But now later on, when I look back, and it's the benefit of hindsight, when I look back, I say, I'm glad I stayed the course, because it is those lessons that I learned during that time that have helped to shape me to the person that I am today. And some of it, I'm enjoying the fruits of the things that I learned at the time. I recall the knowledge that I gained at the time, even though I felt that at the time the payment or the compensation was not great. I've also learned as I've moved along, the importance of leading without title. Now, I keep on referring to where I started. I could have started out and thought to myself, no, this is not for me, with regards to what I was doing at the company that I joined back in 2011. But leadership is not about you having a title. I believe that all of us are leaders in a certain right. And so if you learn early on in your career, if you learn early on as you start out, that for you to be a leader, you don't necessarily need to have a title that calls you manager, that calls you a certain, we're putting a certain prefix to your name. Leadership, you can lead without a title. And so for me, I've found that has served me well, because I've tried to lead in each and every role that I've been in without the title, but not necessarily leading from the front. Sometimes you can lead from the back, but it is in what you do. It is in showing up, what I spoke about. It is in discipline. It is in persistence. It is in doing what you said you'll do. And also, delivering a quality of work that again helps your reputation ultimately at the end of the day. Setbacks are temporal in the workspace. Same thing in university. When you fail a module, it's a temporal thing. It does not mean that you're not going to graduate. Ultimately, you might maybe need to write a supplementary exam. It is the same thing in the workspace, but it is about how you obviously respond to those particular setbacks. And setbacks come in various forms within the corporate space. There's setbacks around discrimination. There's setbacks around unfair practices. There's many setbacks that we can get into, but I'm generalizing it to say setbacks are temporal. When you know your why, and you understand why you're there, and you understand your purpose, hopefully you're able to find what your purpose is in time. Setbacks really become a temporal thing. Most of the time, they actually become stepping stones. When you haven't gotten the promotion that you want, when you haven't gotten, the actual job that you want, when you haven't gotten the salary that you want, these become stepping stones. Use them more as motivators and not as detractors to the bigger picture, because you know why you're there, you know what it is that you want to achieve. And so treat setbacks really as a temporal thing, and don't make permanent decisions based on temporal setback. That being said, of course, I've not worked for one company. At this point in time, I've worked for about 3. The first one really was when I was doing my honors. The second bigger one was when I finished my honors degree. And then finally, the third one is where I am at the moment. I believe that every station has its purpose. So by that, I mean, the first place that I worked, its purpose was to introduce me to the workspace, and I stayed there, of course, to really understand, okay, how does things work? It was my way into the work world. The second part of it was around the second place that I left that particular place of employment for whatever reason, and I went to the next one. And the second part of it was really to now solidify my work experience within that space. And that took me a couple of years to do that, to build a name for myself, to understand this space that I found myself in. And then finally, I then came to the organization that I work for now, where I felt, okay, right, I think I have understood what the industry is about. I think now I'm in a space where I can certainly give myself back from a purpose point of view to go and really do my purpose. And I find myself then in this current position where I take care of the sales organization for our current company for the Gauteng region. And again, I believe that this place again has this purpose in my life. And this differs from person to person, right? All the things that I've spoken about around knowing your worth, about being curious, innovative, and all of that work well in certain environments where the company also allows you to do so, right? Because I need to be very careful with regards to what I say here around the fact that you also don't want to obviously stay in an environment that does not empower you, right? You also don't want to stay in an environment that abuses you. You also don't want to stay in an environment that does not allow the best of you to come out. But you need to be able to distinguish between just hardship and also things that are not acceptable, right? Because obviously in the workspace as well, you also want to be treated well, you want to be given opportunities, you want to be given an opportunity to grow and thrive. However, all of it comes with patience, right? The opportunities come with patience, and the open doors also come with patience. But at the same time, you want to be in an empowering sort of conversation within that particular workspace. The value of relationships, I cannot again understate that how important that is. I believe that my journey has been fueled very much around the relationships that I've been able to build, strategic ones at that. Um, to be able to build relationships, to be able to build a network, to be able to build, concrete relationships that you can fall back on when you need support, concrete relationships of people that you can go to when you need career advancement, of people that you can talk to within that particular space. So for me, my career has largely been driven again by relationships that I've formed all through the time that I've been working in my particular different workspaces. It's very important that you invest in yourself, that you continue to invest in yourself, that you, beyond university, beyond what university will give you now, be able to see what the next few steps are, because it doesn't end there. Add to the body of knowledge, be able to have different conversations, read, listen to the news, know what's happening in the world, and don't let your worldview be limited to where you are. Don't let your worldview be limited to South Africa, because there's a much bigger world out there. There's so many opportunities in the world. There's so much that you've got to offer to the world, and there's so much that the workspace can benefit from having you on board. The important thing is to differentiate yourself, to be able to say, I am the person that you are looking for. And how do you do that? I've shared a bit of what has worked for me, and I hope some of it speaks to what you guys would want to sort of create as you move along. And so I hope that I've tried to summarize much of it really, but I hope much of it speaks to you somehow, and I hope that it will also help you in your own journeys as you journey along. Find a mentor early on. Find someone that you can ask, someone that you can talk to, someone who has the ability to guide you as well as you move along. But find someone that you share certain values with, who understands your why, who understands why is it or what is it that you want to achieve in that particular space. I do what I do or share my stories because I believe, again, to whom much is given, much is expected, much more is expected. And I believe that I've been given very wonderful opportunities as I've moved in my career, as I've tried to obviously, work my way up. And so I hope that in not so many words, to a certain extent, I've given back something or lit a fire somewhere out there with someone. so that as well as you navigate your journey into the work space, you remember some of the words that I've shared today, and hopefully we get to speak some more wherever we meet.
Wonderful, Tinashe. And as I said before, there's so much that we can talk about, because from everything that you said, I've picked up quite a number of things that we'll do follow-up conversations on. But before we run out of time, there's a couple of questions that came in through the chat, and there's some that I have here that were sent prior to the discussion. So I have a question here from Abdiraman. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it the wrong way. He says, how can we get exposure or maybe work in a supply chain environment during our full-time studies? Now, before you answer this question, I think the one thing that I would love for you to actually even include in this answer, you did mention that you got your first contract when you're doing your honors degree. And that was a great opportunity, because most finish their honors and even their masters before you even get a work opportunity. So maybe in that same answer where you get the exposure, how did you get that exposure to actually get that first contract? Was it LinkedIn? Was it the networking on those platforms? Was it just your grades that put you out there on the map? Were there certain programs within your logistics faculty that you joined that enabled companies to identify you? What exactly allowed you to be in that space where someone else that wants to get into that same kind of opportunity as he's saying, while you're doing your full-time studies, how can they place themselves? So if you can maybe enlighten us more on that, that would be great.
Sure. So, well, my opportunity came to me really as a result of, I was part of what they call setbacks at the time, which again, I don't know why I joined it. I was a student and I thought, okay, let me just join setbacks, but I never really fully understood, which is a professional body really for supply chain professionals. And so, at the time I was a bit anxious around, okay, how am I going to get into the workspace? Now, when I was at Sapix, I then attended a conference at the time, again, out of my own pocket in Sun City. Again, I'm a student, I know nothing around logistics. I just woke up there and I use my meager, money that I got at the time to go to Sun City for this particular conference. And I then happened to be talking to one of the gentlemen that I met there, who happened to be an MD at this particular company that I was sort of looking out for. And so what I think, what sort of stood out at the time was, the effort as well that I put in to learn myself there in the first place, coming from a student background, which is something that you wouldn't expect. What's a student doing here? But fortunately, I found myself there. And so that's how my first opportunity really came about. But again, I think much of it really was grace, I can't say that there's anything. I don't want to take too much credit for it. I really think I was just in the right space at the right time. So again, it's a story to tell on a different day. We were on a trip in Durban. That was around 2010, 2011, thereabout. And I was on a trip with the university. And I met this particular gentleman on a boat cruise. Yeah. And so a few weeks later, I was working for that particular company. So I think it just happened that I was in the right space at the right time. However, what do I think needs to be happening now? LinkedIn, very important. Companies recruit a whole lot from LinkedIn. So just make sure that your profile is properly updated and what you have on there properly reflects what it is that you're also trying to bring into the workspace, because your personal branding is very important. The pictures that you put up, and also the what about. There's that space that says what about. So if there's nothing really in there, it won't catch the recruiter's eye ultimately. Secondly, a lot of research around what's happening in the economy, which companies are doing well, which ones are not doing well. This is information that's, again, very much available at our fingertips. But most of the time, we don't know how companies are doing ultimately at the end of the day. For us in the supply chain sector, we've got now floods in Durban. Understand, what's the impact of such things, because that aids conversation. Now, given my current role in sales, I tend to sell everywhere. If I go into a shop and I make conversations with someone, I'll take that opportunity to actually understand what it is that they do, that sort of thing. But what am I saying? you can get your job from anywhere.
Okay.
You can be sitting in a taxi next to someone who knows someone, because it is about the value of networks.
Yeah.
We don't speak enough, and I think that is our biggest challenge in our current day.
Okay, so that's interesting that you mentioned SAPICS, because I had a conversation with someone about a couple of weeks back, and they were asking me, "Are you going to the SAPICS conference?" And I'm like, "I would love to, but it's quite expensive." And she says to me, "It is so worth it because the networking platforms there." So look into SAPICS, look into all these other supply chain conferences, guys. As Tinashe mentioned, maybe that's where your next job is. It might just be a good opportunity. So another question from Asande, she's saying, would you advise a student to do their honors before going into the workspace, or to do it while already working? So do your undergrad, then go and work, and then continue with your studies from there. What would be the best form of strategy there?
There's no right or wrong answer for that particular question. It works either way. If you get an opportunity and the company is willing to take you on board, while you do your part-time studies, obviously you can't work full-time. Rather, you can't study full-time while you're working. Well, I mean, there's people who've done it, but very, very difficult. I wouldn't manage myself. So I definitely advise more on the part-time route if you get an opportunity. It's neither here nor there, you know. So if you're still waiting to get an opportunity and you've got the ability to go back into university and do your honors, by all means, do your honors. But however, if you get a job opportunity and you want to do it part-time, again, that also works very well. So there's no right or wrong answer. I think it depends on your personal circumstances, and it also depends on the strain on your on your resources, if I can put it like that.
Okay, no, that's good, Tinashe. Earlier on, you mentioned something about career guidance. I know some people have had the privilege of having like career guidance before you actually go to university. And then by the time you go, you kind of have had an idea of which profession you want to get into and all of that stuff. But would you say, I mean, for those that have never had that opportunity, it's not for all of us that we've had that. So sometimes we just plunge into supply chain, logistics, law, or whatever, because it's the most interesting job, it's the most well-paying, or you want to travel, or you've heard about buyers being amazing, or something like that. I mean, there's a whole lot of different reasons why we get into certain spaces. But looking at the gaps that you mentioned, would you say that even outside of someone having career guidance, there's nothing stopping them now that they're in university, let's say you're doing your second or third year in logistics or whatever, for them to actually continue seeking career guidance? What platforms would you advise, especially because we're talking supply chain? What platforms would you advise if it's a need for people to actually maybe find information and all of that? And maybe as well, if you're a willing participant for people to pick your brain as well, you feel free to mention it on this platform.
Okay, I'll put my banking details here.
Of course.
No, so look, I think career guidance is something that's constant, pretty much, quite a lot through much of your career, if anything. I still seek career guidance up to this day, because am I gonna stay a sales manager forever? No. This is just part of the journey for me, as I seek to get into the next roles that I want to get into ultimately. But I mean, I spoke of career guidance really as something that I wish I had prior to me getting into the space that I found myself in. Because if logistics hadn't worked out, I'd look back and say, geez, I just landed in logistics not because I wanted to be in logistics, but because I lacked that particular career guidance to the different elements that logistics or supply chain offers ultimately at the end of the day. So what platforms? I mean, look, again, I need to go back to the LinkedIns, to the aspect of us talking as people. We don't talk enough. I mean, there's nothing that holds one back from reaching out and understanding from on the LinkedIn platform, reaching out to someone who's whatever that you want to be. Let's suppose you reach out to a branch manager or something, or you reach out to, I'm trying to think within our space, you reach out to a sales manager, reach out to me, and you say, you know what, I'm just interested to know what this is about, and I want to see if it's something that would be of interest for me. We don't do that enough. We don't reach out to people. And so some of the very rich conversations that I've had have been with complete strangers, you know. I've reached out and I've said, I just want to know a bit more around this particular subject. Would you be able to give me 10 minutes of your time or whatever? And I go there prepared with a proper, not necessarily, maybe we're not meeting necessarily, but we're talking somehow through social networks, and because LinkedIn gives us that platform, right? Secondly, I mean, I've spoken a lot to the power of research. It's important that you research what this industry is about, the different facets. It's got so much that it can offer, you know, suppliers, manufacturing. It all falls into the different elements that make up logistics, right? I just happen to work in freight forwarding, which is just one aspect of a much bigger pie. So one mustn't then, you know, limit their views to one particular aspect. You want to know quite a bit more around all the other things that's there. But hopefully, you know, universities as well are, you know, offering career guidance. Hopefully it's something that they're doing. And so if it's not there, it's possibly a conversation that we want to be taking, up through, you know, the student representative councils, and asking for such things to be brought into university to help people navigate as they move forward.
Okay, no, that's quite something. I hope we are taking notes, guys. But you know, Tinashe, just something that is out of interest. I mean, some of us, when we start university, we just tell ourselves, I'm just doing honors and that's where I'm ending and I'm done. You know what I mean? But we see you've completed quite a number of studies, and you did say you're even considering a PhD further down the line. Would you say that actually then further studying once you get into the industry is the key to climbing up the corporate ladder? Because for most of us, obviously, we study to get into the industry, to climb some sort of a corporate ladder. You don't want to stay in the same place. So would you say further studies are the best way to go forward?
I wouldn't limit it to that. There is people who've, look, studying does give you a certain element, experience gives you a certain element, your relationships give you a certain element. So again, it's really a recipe, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, within our space, let me limit maybe my comment to supply chain in particular. Supply chain, I think, from an academic point of view, is still very much in its growth phase. That's just my 2 cents worth around supply chain. You still find that a lot of people don't necessarily, if you look at supply chain classes, they're not very big across universities. When I don't know now, but I presume maybe it's progressed fairly quickly over the last years or so. But I remember when I had finished my degree and people would ask me, what did you study? I go like logistics, and they go like, oh, okay, you guys are the truck guys. And I go like, no, we're not the truck guys. That's just an element of it, you know, we're not the truck guys. Would I advise on studying further? Absolutely. But again, my comment is a bit biased because I am an academic at heart, right? And so my comment is a bit biased with regards to if you've got the resources and it makes sense for you to study further, hey, by all means, because there's no wasted education. Whatever it is that you go and study, there's no wasted education. But what I can speak to is the importance of strategically studying. Don't just go and study something for just going and studying it. In fact, if there's one thing that I can encourage you guys to look up what they call the future skills of the workforce, right? Very important. There's certain things that are relevant today, which won't be relevant in 5 years' time. There's certain jobs that have come up today that were not there 10 years ago. And there's certain jobs that in 5 years' time will become redundant due to having automation, due to globalization, due to geopolitics, right? Because now we sit on the southern, in the southern tip of the African continent, yet what happens in Russia and what happens in Ukraine affects us on this side of the world. Yeah. The skills that we build must always be oriented towards the future. What does the future look like? What is going to be in demand in future? Data analytics, the ability to innovate, the ability to think outside the box. So there's certain things that will not be relevant, even if you study them today. So it's important that you do your research. You can understand. Go look up an article around the future work skills And I think that will also guide you as you make decisions as to what to study as you move forward. Don't study for this just for the sake of it, but study with a strategic thinking in mind on how we are going to use whatever it is that you gain in knowledge.
I like that. I think that's very important because we're always so quick to want to take up the biggest qualification, the honors, the masters, the PhD, while there's also other professional qualifications that you can do outside of that spectrum. So guys, hopefully you will be able to look up all those things. And as Tinashe said, you can actually pick his brain as well. You'll find him on LinkedIn. If so, jot him a message. I'm sure when he gets time in his busy schedule, he will also put his bank details there. I know that's a joke though. Okay, don't take him seriously. But outside of just focusing on just school and graduates, some of us want to get into an entrepreneurial space. I know it's not most of your focus, but I know you have an idea. So would you say for someone who's got a mindset of getting into the entrepreneurial space of be it freight forwarding, whatever type of logistics it is, do you think, would you advise, or do you think in your own opinion, get into the workspace first, see what's happening at DSV, at Imperial, at wherever else for a couple of years, and then plunge into entrepreneurial spaces? Or can they just plunge into it and you make your mistakes as you go along there? What would be your take on that for those that want to get into that space and just wear it varsity to just get the knowledge and then afterwards straight to me owning my own business?
I love the fact that you've brought up entrepreneurship, because most of the time our conversation ends around joining the corporate space and all of that, which is great. But entrepreneurship does not necessarily have the right time, right? There's certain ideas that are born with one not even having gone to varsity. So there is no correlation between entrepreneurship and education. You've got people, some of the biggest companies were built by dropouts. The gadgets that we're using, some of these guys dropped out of university. We spoke of Steve Jobs. We can speak of Microsoft as well. What's his name, by the way? Microsoft founder. Just his name just escaped my mind. But we can speak of all those great innovations, and it's people who actually dropped out. So is there a correlation between education and entrepreneurship? Possibly not. I guess, again, goes back to the question of, are entrepreneurs made or are they born, right? Which is an age-old question. Do I need to go into industry and learn so that I can be made? Or can I be born with that intuition of being an entrepreneur? There's people who have been entrepreneurs since they were kids. They just grew up selling stuff or being able to exploit certain opportunities. So when I think of the entrepreneurship journey as well, I don't think one can prescribe as to how one needs to go about it, right? And I think the conversation around entrepreneurship is particularly important at this juncture, particularly in this country, in South Africa, where the unemployment rate is very high. We also need to be part of that conversation of, okay, how do we then turn around that particular story? How do we actually become the creators of job opportunities? And it is through entrepreneurship, right? And that's why you'll find that there's many opportunities that the government is trying to forward, particularly onto the youth, to say, if you've got an idea and you've done your research on it, I mean, entrepreneurship is a different topic. We could spend a whole day. But if you've got an idea and you're bold enough to go for it, and you've done your research, you've done your market research, it's scalable, and you're able to actually launch it into the market, by all means. There's many platforms that can support that. The Department of Trade and Industry is one such, and there's many entrepreneurs that one can reach out to. So I'm excited to, I think we all know there's this brand Batu, which has come up, the likes of Drip, they're doing very well. And all of these were born out of entrepreneurship. But again, the entrepreneurship journey itself, I can't speak with authority. I gather that it's a difficult one, but it's one that I'd want to, at a point in time, also be part of.
Yeah. No, definitely. So I'm glad you've already volunteered that our next conversation is how can we turn that around for entrepreneurship? Because as you said, there's so many opportunities. There's after that's coming up, the opportunities that youth can get through there. So guys, watch out. That will be our next conversation. But yeah, Tinashe, I mean, I think there's just so much that can be said about this, you know, and I think something that always is at the top of mind for a graduate. We always tell ourselves, the more we learn, the more money we are worth. And as you did mention, that sometimes what you get from the employer in terms of the experience, the work knowledge, sometimes can be more important than the actual amount of money that you're getting, you know, as you're saying that you've benefited so much from some of the jobs that you did without putting the monetary value to it first and foremost. But you know, where do we draw the line as well? There's a point of I'm being fed, and there's a point of, am I actually selling myself short, you know? And so at which point would you recommend that someone negotiates the value of their work to an employer, especially if you've stayed a long time? Do you think then it's like, okay, maybe it's time for me to leave to look for something else? Or is there a point where, okay, let's have a conversation at this point to say, you know what, maybe now let's consider something of a higher value, especially when you know that what you are giving is not the same as what you are getting in return? How would you recommend that someone negotiates that path?
Sure. So I mentioned two aspects, I think, when I was talking, and I spoke to, you know, that as you gain experience, of course, you're in a better bargaining position, right? And also mentioned the aspect of every station having its own purpose. Now, that being said, obviously, when you start out, that conversation is very much difficult, but you are guided, I'd say, limited to the guidance of what the law gives, right? With regards to what's a fair wage in that particular industry. Different industries have certain different minimum wages that you can't be paid below that amount, right? Mm-hmm. But the company, obviously, that you work for at that point in time, it's at that discretion as to, you know, what offer they gave you, but it needs to at least be equivalent to what the industry standard is. So very important that you then do your research. Again, that word research comes back again, you know, the importance of research. Research is important before you get into the workspace. It's important if you're in the workspace. It's important as you navigate your career, just to find out what's happening. How much are people getting paid? You know, because then that helps you position that particular conversation. When you get in front of your employer and they've given you a particular offer, but then your rebuttal then becomes, oh, well, I hear you, but you know, the industry standard, from what I gather, is around this much. You know, and this is information again that one can get on the net, because again, companies have quite stringent sort of rules around wage negotiations and all of that. As you move on, of course, as I said, as your experience grows, and as you also prove your worth, you know, these things go
in a position to kind of be like, wow,
yes. So you can't be making demands when you're not delivering. You can't be making demands when your reputation does not precede you. You can't be making demands when all those elements that I spoke to, you know, are not working together. But you can negotiate when, you know, you've proved your worth. The work that you're putting forward is of high quality. Then you can negotiate your worth. But again, you're trying to, you know, obviously negotiate within the boundaries of that particular industry. So typically, I would know that in my current space, this is typically how much people would get paid for. Then I would negotiate along those lines, and then I'd add what I'm bringing to the table to say, well, this is what it's a bargaining tool, right? But that comes with time. I'm still learning it. If I could negotiate and negotiate a higher salary today,
you would. Won't all of us negotiate a higher salary? Trust me. So, you know, I think that the last question that I have before we actually close, you know, the biggest thing that most graduates, most work-seeking people, most new work-seeking people struggle with nowadays is this whole aspect of, you see a job that you aspire to be in, and the next thing you see 5 years work experience, and you're thinking, where do we get 5 years work experience? We have just come out of university. Give us the opportunity, you know, then we can. Yes, you get internship programs with a lot of organizations that are being put out there, but they'll take 5, 4, 6 interns, and you're thinking, come on, how many universities are there across the country? How many students are there? What happens to the other 100 and something that do not make it into these internship programs? You know, I think that's one of the biggest obstacles currently and frustrations currently within the industry in terms of finding employment. Yes, that's where we encourage graduates to then obviously look into an entrepreneurial space and actually create the opportunities for work and increase the scope of our economy. But here we are finding the situation. As someone who's who's walked this journey and where you are now, luckily you didn't have to face that whole spectrum of first have how many years of experience before you can come in. So for those that are facing it, how can you encourage them? Maybe also if you know of ways that they can kind of try and jump this hurdle and it's not so much of a frustration. What can you say about this?
That conversation is a very difficult one, right? Because yes, when do I get a 5 years experience if I've never worked?
Exactly.
Of course, this is a challenge more to industry, really, because now I also sit on the other side. I also do recruitment now, and so I can't expect, you know, how do I then give opportunities to certain people when they've never, you know, they've never worked a day in their lives? So it's a conversation that I would direct much more to leadership in organizations, because they're the ones making those decisions. You, on the other hand, are just on the receiving end of the stick. You are receiving what we're putting down as a requirement, but is that requirement realistic? That becomes the conversation, right? Obviously, the only way that you can build talent is if you are willing to give people an opportunity to come in fresh as they are, and then you take them up within that particular space, right? So again, no right answer, but it's one that I would direct more to leadership in organizations. Is there anything that you can do on the other side? Very difficult, because if you walk into an interview and I say, I want 3 years experience and you have none. But maybe what we need to be doing is to be actually then asking rather difficult questions in those particular interviews and saying, well, how are we going to get then the opportunities if you guys are looking for 5 years work experience, yet we've never worked a day in our lives? And these are difficult conversations, but to be able to, you know, have the courage to actually ask those conversations is something that comes with character, right? You go to an interview, they say they want 5 years. Oh, look, I'm a student. I've just come out from university. I've never worked a day in my life, but I know what I can bring. Right? And hence I spoke about the element of being humble, but confident at the same time in your abilities. That is all that you can do. But yes, certainly I wish we had maybe, you know, certain executives as well on the line, so that we challenge them and say, well, you can't recruit for 5 years work experience for junior positions. When someone is just coming out of varsity.
Wow, I mean, like I said, there's a lot that can be said, but I really hope from the bits that we have covered, most of your questions have been answered. This does not end here, everyone. There's lots of platforms where you can continue to get in touch with us, where you can get in touch with Tinashe. We are Awiska. We are available on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We've got a student chapter that you can join where we give further mentorship and coaching and guidance. And we have these webinars where we want to give back to the community in terms of the struggles that graduates and scholars are facing up there. So if you've got other topic or discussions that you'd like us to tackle, please feel free to always send through your information, contact us on those social media pages that I have mentioned. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity that we've had with you, Tinashe. Like I said, I think the conversation could continue because there's just so much to touch on. And I hope this is not the first and the last that we'll have you on our webinars, and we'll come back again with another intriguing topic for our viewers to actually participate in. And as Tinashe mentioned, I mean, he's mentioned a lot of things, and I'm sure we've picked up quite a number of things that we can take home, that we can use. And I think one thing that he mentioned, which is so important, especially for our generation, our social media presence. Lately, we think, you know, everyone has just got so much freedom to do whatever and say whatever. For sure, yes, there is that space, but also I think we need to know what we're putting out there if we want to get somewhere where the people that we want to work for can see us as influential people in the right way. So be wary of what we put out there as our images, because that definitely counts for a lot. So I'm so excited. And actually, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned a lot about reading further, even outside of the scope of what we are, you know, studying. We are supply chain people and whatever, but what are you reading currently?
Right. My current read, I was reading Leaders Eat Last.
Okay.
And that's primarily because of where I find myself in my journey at the moment. So I'm just trying, you know, looking for more wisdom around how I can be a better leader in my space and how I can better serve the people who are part of my team. So currently I'm reading Leaders Eat Last. And so, yeah, I certainly do encourage everyone not to just, you know, limit your worldview to supply chain, but read far more beyond that. I see someone asked, what would I recommend to read? It's look, just read economics, you know, because we're in business, read economics. What's happening in the economic world? Where is the rand trading against the USD? You know, what's the impact of geopolitics? What's the impact of what was the impact of COVID on business? What's the impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict? I think we see, obviously, you know, the increase in fuel in South Africa. Understand what are those things that are you know, that are driving that, and also just understand where we are, you know, in South Africa with regards to our positioning in the greater scheme of things. And I think that will get you places, because when you go into an interview and you're asked a question and they say, well, sometimes they're expecting a very basic answer, right? Then you're there saying, oh no, it's like the Russian conflict, and they call it, oh, we want this person, eh? We want this person. Yeah.
Exactly. No, I definitely agree with you there, Tinashe. I remember I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues a while ago when this whole thing with Ukraine and Russia started. And she was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't even know that there's a war. And a week later, she was the one now who was giving me updates, you know, and she's like, okay, so this is how it's affecting our economy currently. And this is how supply chains can get into the system. And this is how AFTA could actually benefit, you know, and it broadens the minds and you actually get to think outside the box. So guys,
just don't get to a point where South Africa gets bombed and you don't know about it.
Exactly. I mean, wow. I mean, Tinashe, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for the pointers. In closure, what can you say to those that are listening?
Yeah, well, no, firstly, thank you again for the opportunity. I hope that my long, boring speech was not, it didn't put some of the people to sleep. And I hope that, you know, they also took whatever it is that they took from my story. Like I said, Chimamanda writes about the dangers of a single story. And I hope that my story adds on to the many stories that you guys will hear with regards to what people are doing in the world. And I wish you all the best in your journeys. And as I said, I used to be a tutor at a point in time, and I said to my students at University of Johannesburg that I will meet you in the boardrooms. So I truly believe, because you've also made time to be part of this particular webinar, it tells me that, you know, your mind is in the right space, your attitude is in the right space. And so signing off, I will meet you in the boardroom.
Oh, wonderful. Tinashe, thank you so much for the time that you've taken. Thank you so much again. I mean, we can never thank you enough for the pearls of wisdom. And as we always say, you know, there's so many people out there who can give back, but not many people actually have time. And for Tinashe to have taken this time, so much appreciated. And guys, as I mentioned earlier, and if you were joining us from the beginning, Lebo did mention that we are also part of a bigger spectrum. We are a WISCA, we have a student chapter, we support students in every aspect whatsoever. If you require mentorship, if you require guidance, as you can see on the screen, that is our email address. Please get in touch with us, let us know who you are and how we can help you, and then we can discuss further. And as Lebo mentioned, she is a supply chain coach. She is a mentor. If you also want to get in touch with us, I am also on LinkedIn. All our other colleagues, we're all linked to our organization, SingPoint and Awiska. Feel free to jot us something, but there's so many pearls of wisdom. I could summarize a whole story right now, but I trust this is the beginning of us having conversations to empower young people, to empower the youth, and for us to be able to carry forward the mental for growing the economy and actually creating a lot of employment out there. So guys, this is it from us at Awiska. We want to thank you for taking this time. We know you could have been focusing on something else, and we know load shedding is a bit of a mission lately, but you took out the time to be with us, and we really appreciate it. And so, as Tinashe said, we'll meet you in the boardrooms. Thank you, and have a good afternoon. Goodbye.